Good evening. My name is Jimmy Settles, Vice President of the UAW. I am proud to be serving as your General Chair. Welcome to the 56th Annual Fight for Freedom Done Dinner, the world's largest sit-down dinner. It is our distinct pleasure to now call this dinner to order.
Let the dinner begin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Shawn Robinson from Access Hollywood. How's everybody doing tonight? Fantastic. Love to hear that. The dais guests will now be introduced by our media personalities. At the yellow dais, please welcome Mr. Chuck Stokes, Editorial Director, WXYZ Channel 7. At the green dais, please welcome Mr. DeLorean Williams, Denby High School student, DPS, Student Governmental President, Junior ROTC Battalion Commander. And at the red dais, please welcome Ms. Sandra Ali, Anchor, WDIV, TV4. And finally, your homegirl, myself, will be here to introduce the blue dais.
Thank you, Shawn, and welcome back to Detroit. At this time, we will introduce the yellow dais, and we would like for you to please stand as your name is called. The Honorable Chanel Jackson, State Representative, 9th District of Michigan. Ms. Alice Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Black Family Development. The Honorable Lisa Howell, State Representative, Detroit Caucus Leader, Michigan House of Representatives. The Honorable John Dingell, Congressman, U.S. House of Representatives. Ms. Karen Love, Vice President of Public Relations, Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries, 2010 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner Co-Chair. Mr. Terrence Reese, Vice President and General Manager, McDonald's USA. Mr. James Thrower, President and CEO, Jam Jomar Incorporated. Attorney Nabi Ayed, Commissioner, Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Ms. Susan Kraus, Professional Service Department, CompuWare. Juliet Akoti Ebo, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, MGM Grand, Detroit. Mrs. Mary Blackman, Chair, Art Essay Contest, past co-chair, Freedom Fund Dinner. Dr. O'Neill D. Swanson, President and Executive Director, Swanson Funeral Home. Attorney Melvin Butch Hollowell, General Counsel, Detroit Branch, NAACP. Attorney Amy Rosenberg, Chair, Michigan Employment Security Board of Review. Mr. Darrell Middleton, Executive Vice President, Operations and Business Performances, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Mr. Robert Chappell, President and CEO, Chappell and Associates 2010 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner top ticket seller. The Honorable Charles Pugh, President, Detroit City Council. Mr. Tom Shaineth, owner, CEO, Rooster Tail Incorporated. Mr. Richard DeVore, President, Michigan, the PNC Financial Services Group. Sean Wilson, Chief of Staff, PNC Bank. Dr. Mark Saffer, President, Midwest Health System. Okay. Ms. Carrie Moss, Executive Director, ACLU of Michigan. Ms. Annette Rainwater Miller, President Emeritus, Detroit Chapter, the National Congress of Black Women, and National Board Member. Okay. Attorney Michael Roberts, Chairman and CEO, the Roberts Group, and the new owner of the Roberts Riverwalk Hotel on Jefferson. And earlier, she walked in, and we now would like to introduce Dr. Lois Williams. I think that is all of the yellow dais. Thank you. I would now like to direct your attention to the green dais for introductions by Mr. DeLorean Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. It is my pleasure to introduce the green dais. Green dais, please remain standing until the last name is called. Audience, please hold your applause until everyone has been introduced. Mr. Fred Young, Business Rep, IBEW, Chicago. Attorney Chewy Correga. Mrs. Ellen Griffin, Treasurer, Detroit Branch, NAACP Executive Committee. Mr. Lindsay Wright L., Volunteer Assistant to Political Education Department. Mr. Albert Jones, Volunteer Assistant to Outreach Director. Mr. Shakir Wahab, Volunteer Assistant to Outreach Director. Mr. Darwin Griffin, Volunteer Assistant to Outreach Director. Mrs. Dolores Hooten, Volunteer Assistant to Project Manager, Freedom Fund Dinner. Mr. Melvin Hooten, Volunteer Assistant to Project Manager, Freedom Fund Dinner. Ms. Lakeisha Beckton, Young Adult Chair, Detroit Branch, NAACP. Ms. Nicole Fox, Health Education Director, American Indian Health and Family Services, SW Detroit. Honorable Fred Dern Jr., Chair, Michigan Legislative Black Caucus. Honorable David Nathan, State Representative, Detroit Caucus Leader, Michigan House of Representatives. Mrs. Eleanor Jositis, Co-Founder, Focus Hope. Mrs. Bertha L. Crossley, 2010 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner, top ticket seller. Minister Mohammed, Mosque Number 1. Mrs. Joy E. Johnson, Diamond Life member. Mr. Mo Fitzsimmons, UAW Organizing Institute. Mr. James Jenkins, President, Jenkins Construction Company. Mr. Mark Gaffney, President, Michigan State AFL-CIO. Ms. Penny Baylor, Executive Director, City Year. Mr. Jason Lee, Executive Director, DAPSEC. Mr. Andy Levin, son of U.S. Congressman Sandra Levin, 12th Congressional District, Michigan. Reverend Julius C. Hope, Director, Religious Affairs, National NAACP. Ms. Wanda Harper, Michigan Minority Business Development, Alpha Kappa Alpha Foundation. Reverend Dr. Martin Bolton, Pastor, People Community Church. Reverend Dr. Jim Hawley, Pastor, Little Rock Baptist Church. Reverend Dr. Cassandra Hampton, Pastor, Christ Jesus, Personal Image Ministries. Mr. Willie Hampton, Labor Consultant, 2009 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner Co-Chair. Mr. Al Garrett, President, AFF-CME Council 25. Mrs. Sharon Hardy. Mr. James Hardy, Assistant Director, UAW, Chrysler Department, International Union, UAW. Ms. Beverly Watts, Director, Wayne County Park and Recreations. Ms. Sandra Williams, President, Metropolitan AFL-CIO. Honorable Linda Parker, Judge, 3rd Judicial Circuit Court of Michigan. Mrs. Bruce Smith, Volunteer Assistant to Outreach Director. Dr. Bruce Smith, Black Studies Professor, Wayne County Community College. Minister Malik Shabazz, the Detroit 300. Mr. Angelo Henderson, the Detroit 300. Ms. Michelle Brooks, Volunteer Assistant to Outreach Director. Ms. Donna Stallings. Mrs. Danielle Stevens Atari, President, National Congress of Black Women Greater Detroit Chapter. Mr. Wayne Bradley, President and CEO of Detroit Community Health Connection. Thank you, Green Dais. Now let's go to the red dais and for introduction by Mrs. Sandra Ali.
Thank you, DeLorean. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce to you the red dais. And red dais, I ask that you please remain standing until the very last name is called. And audience, please hold your applause until everyone has been introduced. We begin this evening with Mr. Paul Robinson, Most Worshipful Grand Master, representing on his behalf this evening, Mr. Adrian Green. The Reverend Lonnie Peake Jr., President and CEO of eBusiness Strategies. Mr. Chuck Hall, Director of the UAW Region 1. Dr. Carl Gregory, Professor, Oakland University. The Honorary Thomas Stallworth III, House of Representatives for the State of Michigan. Mr. Lumbubba Reynolds, owner of Studio Lumbubba. The Reverend Mayoa Reynolds, Associate Minister, Fellowship Chapel Church. Mrs. Betty Henderson, Career Wardrobe Director for Jackets for Jobs. Mrs. Juvetta Bell, 2010 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner top ticket seller. Mr. DeVisi Crockett, Mr. Detroit Branch of the NAACP, 2011. Ms. Mishara Davis, President of the Detroit Youth Council, Assistant Secretary of the Detroit Branch Executive Committee. The Honorary Craig Strong, Judge, Wayne County Circuit Court. Dr. David Pilgrim, founder of the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia and professor at Ferris State University. Dr. Dan Kirschbaum, Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. The Honorary Brenda Lawrence, Mayor of Southfield. Attorney Kalila Spencer, Chair of the Legal Redress Committee, and Attorney of Honigman Miller Schwartz & Cohn, LLP. Special Agent Andy Arena, Michigan FBI. Mrs. Yvette Anderson, Field Director of Fannie Lou Hamer, PAC. Ms. Dee Dee McKinney Odom, Director of Public Affairs of the MGM Grand Detroit. Ms. Deidre Weir, President and CEO, Legal Aid and Defender Association. Ms. Shakitra Green, Educator and Secretary of the Detroit Branch of the NAACP Executive Committee. Mr. Kenneth Dobson, Director of Governmental Affairs, the Detroit International Bridge Company. Ms. Marja Winters, Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Commercial Revitalization and also third Vice President of the Detroit Branch NAACP. The Reverend Dee Dee Coleman, Pastor, Russell Street Baptist Church. Rabbi Aaron Bergman, Adat Shalom Synagogue. Ms. Amber Hudson, President of the Michigan NAACP Youth and College Division. Ms. Jean West, 2010 Fight for Freedom Fund Dinner top ticket seller. Attorney General Bill Schuette, Attorney General, State of Michigan. Attorney John Johnson, Second Vice President, Detroit NAACP and the Detroit Charter Commission. The Honorary Izetta Bright, Judge, Michigan 36th District Court. Chief Ralph Godby, Chief of Police, City of Detroit. Officer David Anderson, Detroit Police Department, and 2011 Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Awardee. Sergeant Carrie Schultz, Detroit Police Department, 2011 Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Awardee. Sergeant Ray Sadi, Detroit Police Department, 2011 Mary White Ovington Freedom and Justice Awardee. Ms. Linda Fort, Senior Vice President of Business Affairs, Chief Diversity Officer, Comerica Bank. Dr. Kimberly Dawn Wisdom, Senior Vice President of Community Health and Equity and Chief Wellness Officer, Henry Ford Health System. Mr. Harvey Hollins, Vice President, Government and Community Affairs, Wayne State University. Mr. Keith Johnson, President, Detroit Federation of Teachers. Ms. Bridget Hurd, Director, Community Responsibility, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. The Reverend E.L. Branch, 3rd New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. Reverend Maynard Golden, Associate Minister, Fellowship Chapel Church. Ms. Rosetta Golden, Choir Director, Fellowship Chapel Church. And Mr. Lee Yancey, Worshipful Master, Geometry number 49, Prince Hall Masons. And Imam Muhammad Ali Alahi, the Islamic House of Wisdom. Thank you, Red Dais, and please now turn your attention to the Blue Dais for introductions by Ms. Shawn Robinson. Shawn, take it away.
Thank you so much. I will now introduce the Blue Dais. Please remain standing until the last name is called. Mr. Hiram Jackson, CEO, Real Times Media. Mr. Don Davis, President, First Independence Bank. Mrs. Kiko Davis. Mr. Joe Ashton, United Auto Workers Vice President of the GM Department. Mrs. Joe Ashton. Ms. Vivian Picard, Director, Corporate Relations.